So today I'm going to be introducing Robin Perchik. She is going to be discussing the topic Conceived with a Donor, where she's going to be speaking with some donors who, or sorry, not some donors, some children who, oh, yes. Thank you. Robin owns Beverly Hills Egg Donation in the U.S. and Los Angeles. She's worked with recipients in 17 different countries, and she holds a Juris Doctor. Welcome, Robin.
Thank you. I'm actually not speaking on the topic. I'm moderating a discussion with two lovely young ladies who were donor conceived and are the object of what everybody here is trying to get to. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce Abby and Amy and let them talk a little bit about themselves and who they are now and what transpired when they were told that they were donor conceived and how we can do it better if there's a better way to do it. So, Abby, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi. Hi. No. Is it on or no?
No, and we're going to leave a lot of time for questions, so.
No. It's weird. This one on? Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one.
I'm just gonna go over here. Hi, I'm Abby from Los Angeles, California, and I have a sperm donor and two wonderful moms and a younger sister who also shares the same sperm donor as I do. Growing up, there was never a moment where it was, I'm going along, this is how I live, suddenly have a sperm donor. No, my parents were honest with me and my sister from the very beginning, told us, obviously age appropriate, but I never had something, there was never anything missing. It was always, this is who you are, you have a sperm donor or somebody who helped your parents get pregnant. And that was how my sister and I grew up, knowing that some nice man who we don't know helped my parents to have us and just had helped them with the piece that they needed that they didn't have.
And you're now a student?
Oh, yes, sorry. I am currently just finished my first year at Smith College in Massachusetts, and I'm looking forward to talking to you guys today.
Abby is part of the Outspoken Generation, and she works with the Family Equality Council in Los Angeles and speaks in Washington, Los Angeles, and I've heard her speak back in the U.S. and is a big advocate for donor-conceived children. So we're all a little nervous and a little tired, and I'm looking at this, and we're not talking about legal issues in surrogacy for Australians, but that's cute. It's a good thought, but like, really? We're not doing that. So let me introduce Amy to you. Amy's from Australia, so you'll recognize the accent.
Does this one work?
Yeah.
Can you hear that? Okay. So hi, my name's Amy Corduroy. I'm the health editor at the Sydney Morning Herald, and I'm a donor-conceived person. I guess that was never really something that was much part of my identity at all. It's something I've always known because I grew up with a single mother, so it was obvious that there was no dad in the picture. And it wasn't really, I suppose, until I started writing about this issue for work that I really talked about it publicly, and the reason was I was covering a push to retrospectively reveal the identities of men who donated sperm anonymously in the sort of very early period of sperm donation in Australia. And I noticed that there was this, I guess, very vocal group of donor-conceived people and their families who were very, very upset about the fact that they didn't know their sperm donors, and this was a really, having a really massive impact on their lives, and there wasn't really anyone telling the other side of the story. So I guess I kind of, held my breath and thought, oh shit, I have to tell my story if I'm writing about this, and I have such a different perspective to these people. So I ended up writing an opinion piece about the fact that I did not feel that there was anything missing in my life, and I did not feel that the fact of being a sperm donor made someone a parent, and in fact that the things that make you are your life experience, and the things that make someone a parent are the fact that they are parenting you. So yeah, that was when I sort of first really spoke up about it, and I think it's been, I'm glad that I did it. I'm glad that there are people putting that alternative view out there, because I think, you know, if you just watch the ABC in our country, you would think that everyone who was conceived through egg or sperm donation had this huge hole in their life and was really, you know, terribly wanting of this parental figure that they'd never met. And I think that isn't the experience for a lot of us. Particularly, I think, it seems to me, from the donor-conceived children I've spoken to, that it's very much those of us who knew from the beginning, that's just our life and we've never questioned it, that's just, you know, how things are. But it's often the kids who found out a lot later, who thought that they had some relationship that then they then feel changes when they find out there's something different about it with their parent. They're the ones who often feel very troubled by what's happened and really are left with a lot of questions and a lot of, I think, very strong feelings that they find it difficult to unpack. Yeah.
I brought a packet full of blogs to read on the plane from a site called Anonymous Us, and it was basically donors, children who were told later, and they're pretty angry, honestly, most of them. So
there's a lot of anger on that website.
Yeah, there was a lot. I mean, and it was all over the place, and I was really trying. I was struggling a little bit as to whether it was from being told later or just, you know, usual teenage stuff, because I've lived through usual teenage stuff and twice, and you know, we do get angry teenagers sometimes.
My theory is that I think everyone goes through those kinds of feelings of going, where's my place in the world? Right. You know, who do I identify with? And if you suddenly have this outlet where you learn, oh no, I don't know my biological father or my biological mother, you have this huge sort of channeling, and it's almost like it gets a blockage and you get stuck on that fact, and it all gets built into that fact. Whereas for everyone else, they go through that and then they go, oh, okay, well, life's hard and I have to figure out my place in the world, and, you know, but I'll slowly do that, and there's no reason for me to not do that.
It's the idea that you're not who you thought you were, I think, is what causes issues. Because I always knew that I had a sperm donor and that he was someone who was helpful, but not really part of my family, and definitely not a father. And so growing up, there was never a moment where everything changed and I had to re-examine the life I had lived up to that point. And like, my parents never it didn't feel like my parents were lying to me and pulling the rug out from under me by revealing some big shocking fact that really wasn't a big shock at all. Wouldn't have been.
So it sounds like we're in agreement that you should be told early enough to be able to have it be part of who you are. So then I just wanted to, this is kind of throwing a little fastball after a softball, but I'm in the egg donor world, and a lot of people struggle with the fact of whether they're even going to tell their child that there's an egg donor. And we have egg donors who are open, who are semi-open, who are anonymous, and these people are sitting in my office every day, and I want to counsel them on how best to handle this. And there's no right or wrong, well, there's probably a right or wrong answer. The psychologists all say to tell the child, that you should be open with the child and tell them. It's when to tell them is another issue, and
So clearly, in my case, that wasn't an issue because I have two moms, and so it was never like, oh, where did the sperm come from? But I think the best thing for the child and for the family is for them to know that they had somebody else who, depending on how you want to frame it, who gave this part, whether it be an egg or a sperm, to help their parents create the family that they wanted and that they should have. But that doesn't mean that their mother or father loves them any less. It just means that they needed a little bit of extra help in order to form their family.
Well put.
I think, there's a real risk in withholding. I mean, you may feel at the time that you're never going to tell your child, and it is true that if they never know, they're never going to have to deal with those issues. But I think that's quite a risky path to take, because you don't know if your feelings on this are going to change, if there's going to be, I don't know, some kind of, heritable health issue in the future that they may need to be told about, and then I think that you then, you're running a really big risk that you put yourself in the situation where you are going to have to tell them after keeping it from them, and that is never going to end well.
Right, and I do tell them that I think they should be open with them. I encourage people to meet their donors and to spend some time with them. And uniformly, they're very nervous about it, but once they do it, they're happy that they do it. Often when people come to me, they say, the first thing out of their mouth is, I want to meet my donor. I said, okay, and then we get to the meeting, they're like, why am I here? I said, calm down. We're just going to keep it light. We'll have lunch. You'll talk to them. You'll look them in the eye. You'll know that they're normal, from a good family, and everything's going to be okay. And I think the open and honesty is a really good approach, and you see how lovely and well-grounded these two young ladies are I mean, this is what we all want. This is what all of these meetings are, is to have children that are like you, honestly. Really.
I think, too, you know, you have to have yourself really thought through these questions about identity and what, and you know, be prepared for the child to ask difficult questions or to feel confused. And I think, you know, it is a difficult area because in our society there is a lot of confusion around what genetic relationships mean, and I think, you know, particularly because in you know, most of in all of in every country really, there's been some pretty horrible histories of, you know, forced adoptions and issues around women having their children taken away from them. And so we have this, from that legacy of adoption, of how we treated adoption in this country, we have these like really, really strong cultural narratives around, you know, the bond between a parent and a child will never be broken, and it's, you know, and I think that also feeds into a lot of the feelings people have around surrogacy and sperm donation and egg donation. And it's, you know, you have to be prepared to unpack some of those difficult questions, right, and be able to go, well, why is it different to, you know, a forced adoption, or, you know, what are the different relationships here? And you know, I think a lot of people haven't really thought through those ideas that well often.
And it's hard to think through it. It's an on-the-job kind of event. And go ahead, Abby.
Another note on asking questions. I would just put as a piece of advice, don't be afraid of your children's questions, and answer them honestly, truthfully, and obviously at an appropriate level for the child. But the questions that they're asking is just them being curious and them trying to figure out where they fit, not them trying to tell you that you did something wrong.
My mum has this story of, I think it must have been my first early days at preschool or primary school, and apparently I came home and I was walking along with her and I was saying, you know, and so-and-so has a daddy, and so-and-so has a daddy, and so-and-so has a daddy. I wish I had a daddy. And she said she was just completely heartbroken, and I have no memory of this whatsoever. You know, I was just a little kid just saying whatever came into my head, but for her it was this really full-on thing. But, you know, I'm fine.
We wanted to leave some time open for questions because I know a lot of people have questions. Get you next.
Thanks both of you for being brave enough, courage enough, and also eloquent enough to give us a good explanation. I suppose one of the things I'm a counsellor, often find is when I'm interviewing people, they're using egg or sperm donation, sometimes embryo donation, obviously also sometimes surrogacy. But one thing that I do raise with people if they're using eggs or sperm is whether they've considered a known donor. And I suppose I put it in two camps: people who think that's the best thing since sliced bread, and the majority of people who get out the garlic and crucifix and no way Jose. But from two people who are conceived through donor use, for example, Abby, you've got two mums, and a possible donor may have been an uncle or someone like that, or if there was an uncle who was available, and equally, Amy, if there was someone who was close to the family that was available as a known donor, would you have any preference in retrospect, not to change anything in your life, but in retrospect what you would have preferred as an offspring of those donors?
How do you can answer?
I think it's hard to know that. it's hard to say that you would change anything in your life. We had a sort of slightly awkward situation in our relationship, which, you know, I won't go into too much other than to say that, you know, I was born in 1984, so it was still at a time when a lot of this stuff was really unknown. Lesbians at the time couldn't get donor sperm, so I was actually conceived through sperm donated by a friend of a friend, and I didn't know until I was much older that this person, who I vaguely knew, was actually my sperm donor. So I think, you know, that does make it adds a real layer of difficulty with a known donor, and I think that you have to be so clear on what the expectations are on both sides, and you know, for the donor as well. I know someone who donated sperm and who hadn't had any children of his own to some women who were friends of his, and it was always going to be, he was going to be completely on the periphery, and he, as soon as the baby was born, he felt this connection to the child, and you know, luckily it worked out for them, and he just had a more hands-on role. But I think if I was doing it myself, I would want to know that, you know, all those issues were really sorted out and clear before it happened. So I can see why people do get a bit scared of known donors. And yeah, for me, I mean, I certainly, you know, doesn't bother me that I didn't really have this person in my life, and I guess I would prefer that there had been an easier way through it for my family situation, than it hadn't had to involve, I guess, a bit of confusion and back and forth. But, you know, it's fine, yeah.
So in my case, the donor that my sister and I share is anonymous, but we had, well, I'm over 18, but we had the option of finding out who he was and meeting him when I turned 18, and my sister will have that option when she turns 18. And I don't feel any pressing need to know who he is beyond a little bit of scientific curiosity. But I don't feel that, I have two loving parents. I don't really feel that meeting this very nice man who helped me become who I am would add anything to my life, because I don't feel like there's anything missing. So I don't really think that will be something I will be pursuing.
And just to further complicate things, I was this close to being a known donor for my cousin who needed an egg. And she got pregnant on the cycle just before I was going to do it for her. So my godson, Tyler, is known as one good egg, but our mothers are identical twins, so, and we're very close, so I really had no problem with it. I thought it would have been a fantastic experience. Go ahead.
Ask the question of Amy. Being a mother of a donor-conceived daughter, I'm looking very closely at you. And we asked earlier of the group that were born of surrogacy, and I just wanted to ask you, did you have any issues sort of with school, with other children asking questions, how your mum addressed that with you in terms of equipping you with information to be able to discuss that? Obviously at different ages would be in different ways.
Yeah, look, I never remember. People did used to ask a lot, and I think because I'm a little bit contrarian, that actually made me more firm in my position. Because I mean, I had a double thing that my mum is adopted, and for her, it was she found out during a fight with her mother when she was about 20, and so, you know, she had this total opposite experience to me, and she's forever had, you know, for as long as I could remember, was sort of really searching for her biological family. So I think between seeing what she'd gone through and having people constantly asking me about it, I just was like, you know, I'm not buying into this. And I think the way that people asked me was more, it's about them and their relationships with their parents. So I think that they would often picture how they felt about their father and what an important person their father was in their life, and be sort of like, but you know, I feel for you that you're missing out on this thing, and you know, don't you want to know, like because they were imagining, well, if the father I know is my father is out there somewhere, I would want to know him because I love him so much, and it's quite hard, I think, sometimes for people to put themselves in the shoes of someone who hasn't who has a different type of upbringing to them and just doesn't, and has never had that kind of relationship with a father figure. And so it's always, I think, I never had any teasing or cruelness. It was always this sort of well-meaning type of question that, curiosity and just, and kind of almost wanting to, almost not feeling sorry for me, but, kind of feeling sorry for me, I guess. And so I suppose that could have, I think for some children that would bother them and that they would internalise that a bit, and I guess I'm lucky that it had the opposite effect on me. But I think, that also added to a weird dynamic with my mum and I, that I never asked her. I was so, I so didn't care, and I think also felt maybe that if I asked, it would be making a big deal out of something that wasn't a big deal to me. So it wasn't until, I must have been maybe 25 or something, and it just kind of struck me that it was weird that she had never told me anything about my sperm donor when she was so sort of interested, and it was so important to her biological heritage. And then I asked her, but growing up, it was just, I have no memory of ever bringing it up or ever really being bothered by it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Just these days is a little bit different, as you can actually get donors from all over the world. We're talking people coming from South Africa, United States, Europe. And if you could be in the position of being the voice of a future child, what will you say? Will you actually prefer to know who were that donor or where coming from? Or will you wouldn't prefer to actually not knowing? Not in your case, but for our future children.
I think you have to, I think the way society is now, the way so many people feel about biology and the issues of donor conception, I think you would have to tell them, really. I don't think, but hopefully that you will be able to equip them with enough kind of, insight about themselves and about, what a meaningful family relationship is, that they will be able to sort of, I guess, get positive things out of knowing and not be upset by it.
I'm thinking about my experience because I want to apply it to your question, but I like to think that if I had no way of knowing and didn't know where my donor came from, because I know kind of, but if I didn't know where my donor came from, I like to think it wouldn't bother me, but I am an innately curious person, as a lot of young people are, and I would say that it's probably better to know.
I was reading through the submissions to the inquiry into whether they needed to retrospectively identify sperm donors, and I read this really tragic submission. I thought it was really sad, of this young woman who had grown up with her family were Maltese, and she very strongly identified with Maltese culture. She'd grown up in Australia, but she had this sort of strong identification. And then she found out later in life that her father was biologically born through a sperm donor, and she felt that whole identity had been taken from her, the whole Maltese culture. And then later, I think she found out that the donor was also Maltese, and it was such a relief to her because she got her identity back. So I think when you are getting donors from other countries, there are issues around those kinds of issues where people will identify with that culture potentially, and if you are going to tell them and have a donor from another country, it's probably also you need to think about how the future child might identify with that country, what kind of cultural information they want to get, do they want to learn the language of that country, things like that from a young age. They're going to be extra issues that add on to an already vexed question.
I just have a question, a very practical question about genetic testing in terms of inherited diseases. It's very practical, I know, but to not know the sperm donor, how do you ensure that hereditary diseases can be dealt with? Is that something that ever occurs to you or worries you in any way? But I'm talking about informal sperm donor. Is that an issue we should even be thinking about?
Well, I can only talk about egg donor screening, not sperm donor screening, but I assume that they're doing the same type of screening. They might not be doing as much as the egg donor screening, but I know that they must be doing cystic fibrosis and some basic panel screening on the sperm donors. And I know in the egg donor world, we go through extensive genetic testing on many levels, and we have whoever's providing the sperm tested as well. So, often in heterosexual couple, the man is tested for a full panel of tests, and the egg donor is as well, and we have records of all of that information, which the couple has and the clinic has. So I'll have to get back to you on that, but it's just one phone call, so I know just who to call for that.
I think also there aren't that many conditions yet that we really know of where you can identify a straight line genetic risk. There's the BRCA breast cancer genes, but most conditions, it's a very, very complex interplay of genetics and life exposure. So
Right.
I actually think sometimes people do over worry about that point. Really in life, there's a lot more important health stuff we need to be concerned with around, our food and alcohol consumption and our exercise that are going to have a much bigger effect. Yet, I think that, and that's part of a general kind of cultural thing too, that we sort of like to place a lot of hope and thought in genetics when, the picture, the more we learn about genetics, it just gets more and more complex.
Thank you. Have any other questions? Well, it's certainly a complex situation that we're all in the middle of creating, which is fantastic. And everybody wants to be parents, and it's really a need to understand what the children want at the end of the day. The parents in my office all want to be parents. They don't always want to disclose how they got there. They don't always want to tell their friends, their family, the people that they know down the block. But you can see from Abby and Amy's reactions that it's really important that the kids are told, probably told earlier than 18 years old, which, a lot of the people I know in the States that's when they're planning on telling them. So what I've learned from this is get that information out there early and often and let that be part of their identity. So, right. So it's a beautiful outcome. We have happy parents. We have all these people here that I hope next year have children, and there's 20 other people who will be handling those babies and loving them, and you'll just have to, get the counseling to get that information out there. And don't be afraid to get counseling, because we all need it in this process.
And I would say too that, I think that it's a really special thing to be donor conceived. Everyone I know I have a few different friends who were donor conceived, and growing up we always felt it made us kind of special and very sort of wanted and loved, and it's nice to have an interesting thing about yourself to tell people. So I wouldn't worry too much about the effect it's going to have on your kids, because the fact that you're here and you're thinking about it and caring about it is probably a sign that it's you're going to be able to help them through it and be a thoughtful, loving, caring parent. So
your children will always know that they were extra loved because you had to take an extra step to get them.
More than one extra step. Sometimes a lot of extra steps.
Lots of extra steps.
And sometimes whole weekends devoted to learning about all the extra steps. But we want to thank you all for being here today. I think it's a fantastic conference. I'm personally overwhelmed with all of the information that I've heard so far this morning, and I go to a lot of conferences, and I think this is fantastic. Well done. So thank you.